You ever have those days where something really cool happens to you, like Christmas time? I can remember when I got the Stretch Armstrong doll that you could actually stretch his arms way apart and they'd shrink back up to where they belonged. This is kind of like one of those days. This is the Island Armory 22 TCM / 9mm combo kit. Guys, this is a true 2-in-1 gun here. Not only are you going to have the opportunity to shoot the really revolutionary, in my eyes, 22 TCM round by Armscore, but you're also going to have the chance, since they are shipped with another barrel and another recoil spring, you're going to have the opportunity to swap this thing out for well under $1,000. MSRP is going to be up there, but you're going to get this thing for 100 to 200 bucks less at your local gun store. This is a neat setup. Of course, it has its standard Island Armory quality. It's got its parkerized finish on it. It's made out of 4140 steel. You know that thing's going to last. It's got the G10 grips on it. That's always a nice touch. Not only are you going to get the lasting qualities of that G10 grip, but you're also going to have that additional grip that you have. These things are manufactured to give you a little bit more grip than your standard set of, especially a diamond walnut grip might be. These things are nice. Again, you have a pretty aggressive grip on there. Even with sweaty hands or gloves, you're going to still maintain a pretty consistent and steady, firm grip on this pistol. I like the full-length dust cover that has the rail on the bottom. This is a true rail. You can put any kind of a weapon light or a laser or any other crazy little accessory you might want. You'll notice that this thing does not actually require a press release to let you know that they have front slide serrations on it. Yeah, that's a little bit of a slight at Glock there. This thing has some beautiful slide serrations on it. They actually had the foresight to go ahead and put these things at the same angle as the grip. So you're going to have these angled slide serrations on here that look really nice. Got adjustable rear sights. Beautiful set of rear sights on here. I absolutely love the fact that they include a fiber optic sight on the front. Many guys out there, especially if you're going to shoot any kind of a competition, which this thing is rigged out to run a single stack competition in USPSA. But most of those guys are going to swap out the factory front sight anyway and put a fiber optic on it for quicker acquisition. This thing's already got that. You'll notice the magwell connected to the mainspring housing gives you really nice funneled area that's going to allow you to insert that magazine nice and fast and very efficient in the event you are shooting this in competition or even home defense. It's going to give you nice, easy, quick insertion of your magazine so that you're not searching in the event that you're in a high-stress situation and you need to get that mag in there pretty quick. Speaking of the mainspring housing, you'll notice that it's probably about a 25 lines per inch mainspring housing. Guess what? This thing is not plastic like you're going to find some of these other manufacturers out there that are charging you a lot more for a gun like this. This thing is made out of steel. You also have some nice serrations on the front side of the grip also, again, to give you a little bit additional grip. This kit comes with two 10-round magazines. Cool thing is you can put your Armscore 22 TCM in these magazines, and you do not need a separate magazine to put your Armscore 9mm in. Magazines work for both rounds. Very cool. Alright guys, I'm set up over here at 10 yards. No particular reason, just that's where my targets were, so I'm set up there for that close quarter contact. One thing I want to point out really quick that is always important to me with Rock Island, you know, a lot of these big time guys that are charging $1,500 to $2,000 for a 1911 still don't have the craftsmanship that a Rock Island Armory 1911 does. What I mean by that is, notice, and again, this is an ambi thumb safety here, but notice the detent, the way it locks in such a positive position on this 1911. It's audible. You can hear that detent dropping into place where it needs to be, but it's also very positive and it works. I mean, it's in a great position where you can actually feel that it's locking into that detent. That thumb safety is one of the hardest things to fit on a 1911 because not only is it engaging that detent on the outside, but there's 4 or 5 things, I may be exaggerating, 2 or 3 things that it's doing on the inside. There's a lot of stuff that it's doing all at once, and if you don't get that right, you screw it up. And a lot of these guys I notice do not get the detent action on the outside. It's almost like they're overwhelmed by the time they get to it, and they don't have a really positive set when that thing is actually putting in place. All right, let me go. 22 TCM here. 2 things I want you to notice real quick. I want you to note the very slight felt recoil. Notice how the gun is not going to have a whole lot of action. The muzzle rise is going to be very minimal. Also notice for the fun stuff, the fireball coming out of the front. There's a really nice halo around the muzzle. that these 22 TCM rounds produce. Very cool, very low recoil, and a very cool report, and a loud report at that. Not just a visible one, but a very loud one. So note that real quick. Again, I'm over here at 10 yards. All right, now you're probably thinking, like I am, okay, this thing is a very fast round. It can go upwards to 2,000 feet per second. That means it should be a flat flying round, which in turn means that it should be a very accurate round out to a certain distance, right? We're at 10 yards right here. Let's get this thing out there a little bit. Again, we have these high visibility sights on here, so let's take advantage of it. Let's see what this thing can do. Let's see how flat and accurate this thing is at, say, let's march this thing off to about, let's do 50 yards and see if we can get that out of it. All right, fellas, I like to celebrate my manhood sometimes, so instead of me shooting off of a bag at 50 yards over here, I'm going to go ahead and try to strong arm this thing and see if I can't just shoot it free-handed, with a support hand of course, but free-handed at 50 yards and see if I can hit this target. Pretty good size piece of torso-shaped steel out there, so I think I can do it. Hopefully you can see that target out there. The easier thing to have a visual on is the white barrel, plastic barrel. That white plastic barrel is just to the left of my target, and then there's a red piece of steel just to the right of it. My steel is right in the middle of it, and actually there's a big giant airplane flying in right there if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it at that angle, but you probably can. There's an air base right behind us over here. So let's see what we can do on this thing, man. Let's see if I can hit it 50 yards. Again, trying to celebrate my manhood here. That's not real popular these days, politically speaking, but let's see what I can. Man, I can barely see that thing from here. I have one of the worst eyesight. Missed it with the first one. Didn't go in the battery. My left hand's holding the slide over here. I rest my left support finger on the slide pretty hard. Let me try to make sure I stay down here on the frame and not on the slide. I held the slide open. We have a really a weak recoil spring on purpose on this thing, but a weak one nevertheless. So if you're used to riding your support thumb on the side of your slide, you probably want to get that down there because you're going to inhibit that thing going back in the battery, just like I did. Operator error. There are times in my life where I set out to try to prove to the world just how manly I am, and there are times in my life where I fail. This is one of those times. All right, I'm going to bag this thing. We try not to include any George Lucas style special effects in our videos. That includes when we miss, and we don't try to fool you into thinking that we made the shot. I was unsuccessful at 50 yards. I actually walked out there with the last two shots. Probably took off 10 to 15 yards off of my my length here, made it 35 to 40 yards, and was shooting it standing up. So my guess is it's not the pistol, it's me. So let me bag this thing and I'll bet you I can hit it now. Let's see here, guys. Alright, I got it that time. I was shooting high. I must have just been going over it. I shot at the mid-lower portion of the target. Got it again. Okay, I got it figured out now. It shot a hair high at 50 yards. Got it again. Alright, I gotta prove. I gotta prove this. Alright. Now that I know where I'm shooting at, let's see if I can steady this thing well enough to actually hit it free-handed now. Are you with me on this? Missed it that time. Whoa! That's a nice trigger. Notice my hand shaking. last shot I got it. So I shot 20 rounds at that target. I hit it with one at 50 yards. So I guess that makes me about a 5% man, right? If I'm trying to show my manliness here and celebrate it. But the gun did fine, man. I mean, that's awesome. Look, understand, guys, I'm not shooting over the target to try to launch that bullet and make it hit. Keep in mind, this is such a flat flying round that when I shot at the center of my target over there, I'm shooting over the top of it because it's such a flat round that you don't have to compensate for any kind of bullet drop at this short of a distance. A couple of things when you have a slide that's got some mass to it and that light of a recoil spring, as you see, the gun won't go into battery easily if you're riding the slide a little bit like I did earlier. And that's real important. You got to make sure that whenever you have this light of a recoil spring that you're not throwing a roadblock in the way of your slide when it's trying to do its business with that light of a recoil spring. And one of the things I wanted to try to do was to shoot this thing one-handed, because again, one-handed is going to get a little bit closer to limp wristing, which is going to cause some feed problems also, or some ejection problems, I should say, not necessarily feed problems, but you know what I mean. That's important because the 22 TCM is such a cool round. Can it be used as a self-defense round? And if you're using it as a self-defense round, there's always that outside chance that you're going to need to shoot this thing with only one hand. So I want to give this thing a shot real quick. All right, that worked out pretty good. I have a habit whenever I'm shooting a 1911 just to naturally ride my thumb on top of the thumb safety. That does a couple of things. It helps to keep the gun down, and it gives you additional grip. I mean, you're really locking this thing in there. So a one-handed shot is relatively easy on 1911 because you have that. You just got to be careful that that thumb is not riding too close on that slide. So I made sure that I didn't do that, and as you can see, there were no issues. There were no ejection issues, no feed issues, anything of that nature. So clearly this pistol has been tuned perfectly, and I'm not just trying to heap the praise on these guys, but it takes a lot. I'm telling you, shooting a gun one-handed with this light of a recoil spring can throw you some problems. And clearly these guys decided and defined, I should say, exactly what recoil spring they could get away with and still have this thing function perfectly, whether you're using a support hand or just your strong hand. Of course, now everyone wants to be dazzled with how quickly I can tear this thing apart, right? All right, let's see here how my magic is as far as getting this thing torn down. Watch your eyes there, wear your eye protection. I'm not always the best example, I don't mind admitting that. But again, I'm not going for a record here. I'm just trying to get this thing broken down and change back out here. All right, let's see here. Let me get everything. Am I bushing at? Bushing out of there. Get my barrel out of the lugs. That's my 22 TCM barrel. When I'm making this conversion, I like to keep the recoil spring plug on the actual recoil spring of the caliber that I'm doing away with, that I'm changing from, because that allows me to get everything in place that I need to, including my guide rod. And then I know that the recoil spring that does not have the plug on it is the one that I'm looking for. Then I can go ahead and take my plug off of the other spring that I had and put it in there, and I know I'm good to go. That just gives me a way to keep track of it. Again, I keep it on the part that I'm disassembling until I'm ready to actually put it on the new part. And the beauty of this thing, again, remember, our 9mm rounds and our standard 22 TCM magazines work perfectly with our 9mm rounds. The versatility of that is really pretty sweet. That definitely keeps you from adding more components. I mean, you're talking about two completely different functioning firing guns, different uses. A 22 TCM you can go out and have fun with and target shoot. With a 9mm you can actually carry this thing for self-defense, and all you have to do is change out your barrel and recoil spring. You're using the exact same magazines and every other component that the weapon actually comes with. And of course you're wondering while yapping to the camera, did I remember to put the right recoil spring in? Sure felt like it. Let's see. I'm used to those magazines that don't have that kind of a round count. We got 10 in this bad boy. Sweet. You saw how that thing functioned. Works flawlessly. Folks, this thing is cool. This 22 TCM 9mm combo unit from Island Armory is one of the most versatile guns that I've ever shot. The fact that I can go from one type of performing round in the 22 TCM that's more of a target shooting type round and a fun shooting round to a business round like a 9mm using the same gun and simply changing out my barrel and recoil spring, that's cool. Also magazines. I know that I can buy a slew of these magazines, and if I want to equip some of them with 22 TCM and the others with 9mm, I can do that also, or I can equip them all with one round or the other. That versatility with that magazine, that's a nice touch also. Add to that, you get that in a 1911 platform. One of the most accurate shooting guns out there. You add that flat flying round of a 22 TCM to this accurate of a platform, you're talking about a spot on firing weapon, right? It's not only a lot of fun, these things are functional and very, very effective. I can see using this thing, maybe you use it as a truck gun. You have your self-defense rounds for your 9mm, but you've always got that extra barrel and that recoil spring in there with a few boxes of your 22 TCM round in the event you run down to the range. Very cool setup. And not only do we get this combo unit in the familiar platform of a 1911, we also get it in the familiar but very high quality and affordable Island Armory brand.